Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caleb Teskey, and today we got a great interview here. I'm joined by Tim Fair from Vermont Cannabis Solutions. Tim, thank you so much for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, Caleb. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is awesome. You're the first lawyer that's agreed to speak with me in the history of me trying to get people to speak with me. So
I was the first lawyer to have anything to do with the cannabis industry, so sometimes you just got to do it.
Awesome. Listen, for all my newest guests, I like to start with a little segment I call 5-minute life story, where you tell us maybe a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you went to college, your first girlfriend, anything you think might be relevant up to owning Vermont Cannabis Solutions.
Right on, man. Well, I did not exactly have a traditional upbringing in life, so I'll kind of give the Cliff Notes amended version. And if you happen to want to get into anything, I really there's nothing.
You can make it 10 minutes life story if you want.
Nah, nobody wants to hear 10 minutes of my life story, believe me. Grew up in New York City. Grew up in an extremely dysfunctional household, bounced around a lot. Ended up with my grandmother's to finish up high school. We're on the Queens Nassau border on Long Island. Moved to Queens, lived there till about 20. Got expelled from SUNY New Paltz for half a joint in 1997. I was there for all about 3 weeks on a their very debut of a one-strike policy on cannabis. I was expelled. I ended up going to Hawaii for a year, living in Maui on a beach when I was 19. Got incredibly sick with a staph infection. Had a girlfriend fly out and fly me home. Ended up going to Colorado for a little while, University of Colorado Boulder. Basically flunked out after a semester and a half. Then I started skydiving and stopped going to classes. I was a skydiving instructor for 4 years.
I saw that. Yeah, that sounded cool. Yeah.
Dropped out of college, moved out of my apartment, maxed out my credit cards, started living on drop zones. When I was down in Florida, I developed quite a cocaine habit where it was very cheap and very prevalent. Brought that back with me. Kind of ran me right into the ground. Almost died. Got arrested in 2004 with 68 grams of cocaine. Got really fucking lucky. Managed to get it pled down to misdemeanors instead of a felony. My white privilege at its finest. I didn't even have money. I was just lucky. I was tall, white, male, and talked well. Finally got my shit together in around 2006. I went to jail in 2006. Got out. Started getting my shit together in 2007. Still kind of dabbling. 2008 is when I finally got clean. That's when I went back to finish up my undergraduate, and then started law school in 2010. And now, God, been a lawyer, practicing lawyer in the state of Vermont. I can't believe it. My 10-year anniversary, my 10-year reunion is next month after law school.
That's not something I would have asked about, but you brought it up, and I'm glad that you touched on that, because that seems like a long road from drug use to being an active lawyer, man. Like, how do you? How long have you been?
That was the title of the reporter for Vermont Digger. Morgan True was actually a really great writer. He's no longer with them. I have a lot of respect for Morgan.
Yeah, I read the story.
Yeah, read the story. Yeah, I thought he did a great job with it, and he was pretty much like, "You don't care if we tell this story." No, I am who I am. I never thought I'd be a lawyer. They told me that they didn't know if I was going to be a lawyer. Told me when I applied to law school, you can go to law school, but we can't promise they're going to let you be a lawyer. And I had to take the bar exam, not knowing if they were going to let me be a lawyer. That part is called character and fitness. You only do it after you pass the bar. So I could have very well been told no. And the whole time I had people telling me, they're probably going to tell you no.
Well, and in Vermont, you don't have to go to law school. Isn't that correct?
It's true. You can, in lieu of going to law school, you can do what's called a 4-year clerkship program, which is when you work with an attorney. It's a pretty regulated program. You do it through the Bar Association. You have to give quarterly updates, and you have to hit certain benchmarks, so on and so forth. But it's pretty much self-taught. And that qualifies you to then take the bar exam. You still have to do things like pass character and fitness and pass all of the other things, just to alleviate you from actually having to pay and go to law school.
Did you go to law school though?
I did. Yeah, I went to Vermont Law School. The problem is the pass rate on the bar exam for going to law school is about 65 to 70%. Wow. Roughly 2/3. If you read for the law, the pass rate's 33. So it's only about 1/3 of the people who read for the law actually pass the bar. Because you're very exposed to one area of law, but not you learn what your office learns. You learn what your clerkship does. You don't learn anything else. So that can be a real challenge for some people.
Huh. Okay, cool. You have to bear with me here. This is the first time I've talked to a lawyer, and I have so many questions for you. And
Well, you know what? I'm not billing you, man. So we got all afternoon. Don't worry about it, bro.
So everyone else can suck it. Yeah. First of all, I just wanted to say the best of luck with your recovery, man. I know how difficult that can be. And,
cigarettes are the hardest thing now. Everything else is fine. My old age, I couldn't get that high anymore. The goddamn cigarettes I can't get rid of. Oh, they're the worst, man. It was easier quitting heroin. I swear to God.
Yeah.
Coke. I'm not talking like sniffing. When sniffing stops, you start smoking. When smoking stops, you start banging. That's where I was at.
Well, this reminds me. I was going to say this till the end, but I'll ask you right now. I'm curious about your thoughts on legalization of other drugs.
Well, I think everything should be legalized. I think everything should be regulated, but everything should be legalized. The harm we see in drugs is not for drugs, it's from prohibition. If there was a center where people had to go and they could get drugs, because drugs are cheap. Drugs are not expensive. Clandestine, illegal black markets and prohibition is expensive. It doesn't cost very much money to legally produce very clean and very, pure drugs. Most people who overdose because it's cut. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have anyone near them. They're scared. They're doing it. They're sharing needles. They're causing, all of the crime that's around it. Drugs don't make you break into a house. Not having money for the drugs makes you break into a house. So if you had a community center where people could go, if they want to get high, and they would have to do a mandatory hour of drug counseling every time, and you could sit there and twiddle your thumbs and whatever, do your drug counseling, get your drugs, do your drugs. Do it in a safe environment. Do it where there's going to be medical professionals. This would cost a lot less than incarceration. And you know what? Most drug addicts don't want to be drug addicts. And while they might ignore that counseling the first 10, 20, 30 times, one day, at one point in their life, they're going to listen. Nobody wants to be a drug addict. There's always an underlying reason that somebody's a drug addict. And criminalizing the drugs just exacerbates the problem. It's really common fucking sense. It's basic harm reduction when you look at actual, true, honest to God, effective drug policy. I always ask people this: most addictive fucking drug known to man is, without a doubt, nicotine. 1966, 1965, 64, in that area. Some ridiculous statistic, and I don't know exact, but it's somewhere around 67% of American adults smoke cigarettes. And today it's under 13%. How did we do that? Did we do that by raiding people's houses and shooting their dogs and taking their children away when they had cigarettes? No, we educated the population on what cigarette smoking does to you. We waged a successful campaign of education, not of no-knock raids, kicking people's doors in, shooting them, and they're getting the wrong person, the wrong apartment, because they had the cigarettes. It sounds like a joke, but that's exactly what we do for every other type of substance. Now, when we have done that, what are the effects of cocaine use and heroin use? I mean, identical, if not more. You can teach, people want to learn, they want to know the truth, and they will eventually leave drugs on their own. We've done it with cigarettes and smoking and nicotine, and we've shown what effective drug policies should be. Educating people. If you do this, this is what's going to happen. If you don't want this to happen, don't do this. So it's not rocket science.
So you're a fan of the harm reduction models?
Absolutely. People are going to do it. Why not do it safely and in a conducive way in which you can subtly convince them it's their idea? Every drug addict doesn't want to be a drug addict. I'm telling you this from personal experience.
No, and I feel you. I've had a number.
Anything else?
I'm from the Northeast Kingdom, so I know a good amount of heroin users, and I'm with you 100%.
It becomes your life. You wake up, how am I going to get more? Where am I going to get it? How are we going to do it? Who am I going to do it with today? Who are we going to get it from? Who has good shit? Who doesn't have good shit? The drama. I got ripped off last time. This is your whole fucking life. It becomes your identity. But no, you don't want that. Nobody wants that. You just don't think you're any better. You don't think you can ever break free. And when you have an opportunity, maybe I'm going into my fucking thing, getting my goddamn shit and shooting up, but I got to do my hour of counseling. And like I said, eventually that counseling will affect most people. Not all,
Yeah.
and some people will just do drugs until they die, and great. Rather than breaking into my house or taking taxes for a criminal justice system that's overworked, broken, and is allowing real, true criminals in danger, to get jammed up in a system and get released because they're so busy prosecuting nonviolent drug offenses. I mean, this is just fucking ridiculous.
Wow. So before you were doing the Vermont Cannabis Solutions, what were you doing in the legal system?
Well, I went to law school. I was a criminal defense. I was going to be a criminal defense attorney. Much to my now thinking back regret, I really focused all my classes on litigation, trial practice, evidence. I did not take corporations and business law. I have taken that course in the last year, and a crash course pretty much. But that was what I wanted to do. I've always been passionate for drug policy reform. I tried to form a chapter in Normal and Nassau Community College right after I got expelled from SUNY New Paltz, 98. They didn't go well.
Why is this important to you, man?
Because I realized at a young age that we were all being lied to, that it was bullshit, that pot doesn't kill you, pot doesn't hurt you. I grew up in a particular interesting, I grew up right in Queens in a very white suburb neighborhood, right on the Queens-Nassau border, like all the way in eastern Queens. But we had Jamaica Avenue right across the street. I saw like how the cops treated me and my friends on literally one side of Jamaica Avenue, and friends of ours who were Black and Hispanic right on literally on the other side of Jamaica Avenue. And while we might get yelled at, we might get a ticket, they were getting cuffed and they were getting brought to rights for things like a joint. When I started smoking pot, I realized it's just a lot better than alcohol. I'm not really the asshole I am when I'm smoking this. And it really got me thinking, and I just started looking, and I started reading, and I've always been a reader. I've always really enjoyed understanding history. And when I really realized why marijuana in particular is illegal, and why drugs are illegal, and why the war on drugs in 1970 was created by Richard Nixon, under the Controlled Substances Act. I mean, anybody who thinks that was because they cared about public health policy really got a lot to learn. I mean, it is blatantly racist. It was blatantly, and they didn't even try to hide it. They said the quarter part out loud. There was just no qualms about it. Heroin was criminalized to go after the African-American anti-drug, Black Panther movement that was seen as radical rebellion. And pot was, put as a Schedule I so they could go after the hippies and the anti-war protests. And this is not hidden. They know it. They admit it. There's openly, people talk about it. But yet,
yeah, that's not a secret anymore.
It's not a secret. It never was. But people don't want to believe that. They don't want to believe that. They want to believe the line. They want to believe what they're told. It makes it. They want to believe Nancy Reagan cracking an egg.
Just say no, man.
You're brain on drugs. When you're looking at the marijuana tax stand back now, 1932, we're going after them Negro musicians sleeping with them white women. I mean, it's not, they don't even try to hide it. And when I really started understanding this, it drove me fucking crazy. People, we've got so much to learn and fucking get together and stop putting apart all of this animosity. And when we have things like the public systems we're supposed to be have trust in, lying to us and utilizing that system specifically to marginalize particular sections because they don't happen to like the tone of their skin color or their religion or their language. It just pissed me off. And drug policy was one of those areas that I saw that was exploited more so than I think just about any other.
Now, I wanted to ask you about that because this is something that I thought was a very good point. I like this social equity portions of the bill. Say, hey, we're going to help women and, historically marginalized communities. But then they bump the women down. Native Americans, I don't even think got on there at all. And I was hoping to hear your thoughts on the social equity piece of this legislation.
I really appreciate you raising that question. In 2014, when Colorado legalized, nobody knew what social equity was. Nobody was talking about It was really when legalization in the East Coast started happening that conversation, 2016, 2017, with Massachusetts, really, you give credit where credit's due. Massachusetts was one of the leaders on this concept. And then everybody else was like, oh shit, yeah. And the concept is a fair and a basic concept, which makes a lot of sense. The war on drugs has disproportionately impacted Black and Latino communities across this country. That is a fact. White people too. That you do the Venn diagram and you can see socioeconomic status. A lot of poor white people down south, meth raids in the Midwest. I mean, they've had their lives pretty much ultimately destroyed as well. But nothing like the systematic use of drug law and drug policy to marginalize the South Bronx, Brooklyn prior to the gentrification back when Bushwick was a dangerous place. This was used. This was used to control. You stay here. You do this. You get off the street when we say you get off the street. You go on the street when we say you go on the street. It's not martial law, but if you're anywhere outside of what we want, we're gonna fucking drop the hammer on. So social equity as a concept is something that's needed. Black people have been going to jail for selling pot for 40 years. Sometimes.
So you got to see a little bit. You got to see a little bit of that living in New York City.
Fun.
Yeah.
Very clearly. It was night and day. It's just the way it was. And at the time, you're a teenager and you're a punk, and you're just like, ooh, yeah, you get cuffed and hold up, bitches, yeah, thinking you're all cool and shit. And it just doesn't take a few years to start realizing just how fucked up that really was.
Yeah, it's not that funny later.
No,
you're like,
no, it's not that funny at all. When the white cops are like, screaming at you, get the fuck out of here, get the fuck out of here. I got pulled over in Bushwick, Brooklyn. We was dope in the center console, me and my friend Eric McCormick. And the cop's like, how about I take you and your friend out of here? I'll take you down to the station. How about I leave your grandmother's car right here for the homeboys to come down? They'll have this thing stripped in a minute. Scared the living shit out of my white ass. And you know what they ended up letting me do? Drive away. You're right on the BQE. I don't want to see you in this neighborhood again. Go. That was typical for us, wow. Whereas if I'd been Black or I'd been from Bushwick,
yeah,
I'd be lucky to be alive. I'd be lucky if I'd made it to the station, definitely with an ass whooping, like no question about it. A little resisting arrest, yeah. And so seeing that really, it taught me what white privilege was, and with the cannabis industry, because of that historic nature, yes. How can we justify white people making millions of dollars for something that there are a lot of African American and Hispanic American in prison still now for the next 20 or 50 years in some cases, for life in some cases, for doing the same thing that white people are now making millions of? That just is not right. But how do you fix it?
How do you fix it? You're the lawyer, man. How do we...
I will tell you, Cannabis Law Institute, we do a week. I'm doing it next beginning of June. We spent 4 days with all the cannabis lawyers in the countries. When I started in the organization, there was 200. Now there's over 600. Went from the national to the international. 2019, right before the pandemic, that CLI, 4 days, pretty much every single session was about social equity. Social equity is a dynamic concept because there's no one size fits all. Social equity is not the same in Brooklyn as it is in Chicago, as it is in Burlington. And even in Burlington, it's not the same as it is in Barton, Vermont. We have to understand, we have to respect the fact that we're a 98.9% white state. So what does that mean? How do we do it? Do we go find Black people? I remember one of the Black cannabis attorney, we're all talking about, licensing and preferences. Somebody says to the whole room, he's like, you know what? All Black people don't want to sell pot. How about us? How about the people that don't want to be part of this industry? We don't like it. We don't believe it. It's been, but yet we have been victimized by it. How do we get resources? Yeah, is right. I think every white guy in the room was like,
that's a great point, I think.
That's a great point, exactly. And so what is it? Do you set someone up to fail? Do you give them a free license and a free business where they have no business experience, no capital, no investment? So you're just setting them up so they fail? Is that social equity? is teaching them how to do this, is holding their hand. If somebody wants to be part of this market, should we make it easy or easier for somebody who has been impacted? Yes, absolutely. But how do we do that the right way? How do we do it effectively? How do we pay back to communities who have been marginalized, who are not part of the industry? How do we take someone who doesn't have any business skills but wants to be in this industry, in a highly regulated industry? How do we help them succeed? How much is too much? How much should we leave to an individual? How much should be done by the state? How much should be done by other actors in the community? These questions are amazing, and it's a conversation that we need to keep having. And nobody's gotten it right yet. But every time it feels like it's getting a little better. With Vermont, the original social equity policy included everybody. It included women, it included African Americans, it included Native American. You know what? It included everybody except for white men. And when you have a policy that specifically excludes one race and gender amongst everybody else, the law looks at it in terms of swap white with black. If you had a policy that every single person could benefit for except African American men, that's how a court would look at that as well. So you have to be careful on how you craft these things to make sure they don't violate equal protection, which is a constitutional right that we all theoretically have.
Well, and that's one thing that I have said as well. It's like, just if you look at the demographics in Vermont, it's overwhelmingly white. It's like a fucking blizzard of white folks out here.
It is.
So when you look at the people who are disproportionately affected by prohibition, probably a lot of them are going to be white people, just by the numbers, and I'm all in favor of giving everyone the leg up, but it seems like this is not the same as doing it in Colorado or in LA, where they have a diverse population. We're in Vermont. We have a flood of white folks.
It's really true. And, God bless, I love our social equity applicants. I'm so excited about some of the projects. But at the same time, I don't feel like we're doing enough. But I don't know what to do, because there's a lot of ideas that sound good on the surface. They sound great on sound bites. Buy the building, give them all the money, give them all for free. And they make great, PR. They get great 5 seconds on Instagram or whatever. But 5 minutes of critical thinking and actually like, all right, well, if we do this, then what? How does that impact the long-term success, the long-term feasibility of this, venture? And a lot of times it doesn't hold up because there is no clear-cut answer. And we're trying to do the best we can, and the concept has to be understood to be dynamic, meaning we have to be willing to look at what's working and emphasize that, but we also have to acknowledge what's not working, and we have to be willing to cut it away like deadwood. We can't just let it. Sure. The legislator hates, changing, but it really has to be seen in that.
No, that's a great point, and that's a question I had for you later, but we're going to come back to that. Don't jump ahead of me, sir. No, but that's a really good point you make. No. And look, like, what are you guys looking at for reference models? I assume you're looking at other states. You're looking at Colorado, California.
I mean, Andrew and I, in the last 3 years, with just doing hemp and CBD, we had a lot of time to study state THC laws. We have, I can tell you quite a bit about just about every one of the 18 legal jurisdictions down to the nuances in their advertising laws. But because of the state-specific nature of this industry, it is really, people love to compare. They like patterns. They like things to make sense. They like to understand it. Well, if it happened in Maine, it's going to happen here. If it happened in California, it's going to happen here. It's all pot, right? I couldn't be farther from the truth. And I can tell you exactly, like California, for example. It's just real quick. California, you're talking about a state that had a de facto legal system for 2 generations. So it's basically 1995. In their medical program. They're very lightly or loosely regulated medical program, but it existed for 25 years and it existed well. In some cases, there were 2 generations of families running the supply chain throughout California, and it was effective, and the stores were good, and it was wonderful. For the most part, a lot of illegal growers, a lot of scumbags who were really detrimental to the environment up in Northern California, killed Humboldt, and that's human greed. But the system worked. It was providing patients with good quality cannabis statewide on a regular basis. You had, visionaries like, Harborside, Steve D'Angelo, all the old G Guard who really made this work. And then in 2018, the state imposes on January 1st, these unbelievably restrictive, unbelievably expensive to get into compliance with regulatory structure, and just imposed it on a pre-existing and all of a sudden you had family businesses who couldn't afford to come into compliance, who had been working. I mean, this was the grandfather, the father, and other sons. I mean, this is really long term, 2.5 decades out of business overnight. Because, well, they would have been, but they all said, fuck it, we're not going to comply because you make it impossible to do so. So that's why we see this, nonstop black market in California, because they've been there for 20 fucking years. They're not about to stop. You also have 750 dispensaries in LA County alone.
And when you sort of red tape people, you kind of like trying to comply them into non-compliance. I don't know. It seems like overly burdensome.
It was incredibly overly burdensome. It was insanely overburdensome. Caleb, you had now, where they, like I said, they had a good equilibrium going. Now all of a sudden you're imposing regulation at a municipal level, in most cases, a county level, a state level, and then a cannabis control board administrative level. So you had 4 levels of regulations, which oftentimes contradicted each other.
And now I'm hearing like Morrisville has just installed a cannabis control board locally.
Well, let's talk about Vermont. So that's California. This is why you see the issues you see in California. This is why the price issues, the taxation issues, those don't translate to other states, though, because other states don't have the same underlying circumstances. We're talking about Maine and why their medical program was great, cultivation, now a lot of product. Vermont is doing something brand new, man. I mean, this is really, we are incredibly unique. And I don't think people understand, really appreciate exactly how unique we are. Our maximum indoor grow license is capping at 15,000 square feet. Now we have a 25,000 square foot tier that might be opened up. Will probably be opened up next year. Even 25,000. Arizona, 50,000 square feet is a micro grow. It's a postage stamp. You're talking about, they're building greenhouses now, 300, 400, 500,000 square feet. Aurora Sky up in Canada was slated to be 1 million square feet. It never got off the ground. They ran out of Aurora, crashed and burned. But that was, the size. 250,000 is not unusual. 125,000 square foot grows in Massachusetts. So without that scale, this is why we don't, despite all the people and the fear. I mean, I remember last year, everyone telling me that the 5-month head start was the death of the Vermont cannabis industry. They're going to open up and it's going to be the death. They're going to dominate them. They're going to quarter them up. It's May what? I don't see any of
also, to be fair, I think the Vermont Growers Association got that dismissed. I don't think anyone is going to have the 6-month head start in Burlington, at least.
There's been no integrated licenses issued statewide, and we knew. I can tell you, again, it's critical thinking. MSOs, cannabis MSOs, they're scary. They're corporate. You know what? None of them are making money. There's only one multi-state operator in all of the United States that is in the black, and that's Trulieve. Out of Florida.
Who backed the deal with Slang?
Kim Rivers. They had loaned some money to Slang, because Slang is a penny stock company that's crashing and burning. In fact, if anything, I bet you what they issued was convertible debt in order to be able to death spiral it
convertible
and then
debt,
buy equity back into it and basically do a hostile takeover in 2 or 3 years down the road.
But her husband is also in jail for extortion, corruption.
Yep. Nothing to do with the company. Kim Rivers is brilliant. I've heard her speak, but I mean, love her, hate her, all the fucking controversy. She's the only one who is running a cannabis company in the black. Curaleaf's still losing tens of millions of dollars a quarter. Every single one of them is red.
Do you think this issue with Ukraine has affected them? Because I know that Curaleaf is owned 30% by Boris Jordan, who's like a Russian banker.
Right. Do you invest in anything? Do you invest in anything, Caleb? Do you buy stocks? These Russians, do they have money in it? Of course they do. Are they showing up at board of directors meetings and making everyone prance around reading profs? No, they're billionaires that have equity in companies all over the world. And that's one merely portfolio line number. I mean, it's this whole kind of concept has gotten so blown out of proportion of what it actually is. Just business. It's all business. Every Disney owns everything anyway. You know, if you knew who owned percentages of Tesla and all these big ass companies, it's people. What we have to worry about is the practical implication on Vermont. And the practical implication on Vermont is none, because these companies are not looking at Vermont. The one license limit was incredibly effective. The fact that New Jersey and New York are both coming online right now that are estimated to be between a $5 and $6 billion market. We're at $200 million, 250, maybe 3. I think we're going to be a little higher, but I'm going with
I also think that, yeah.
One license, no bigger grow than 15,000 square feet. You're going to bother getting established and wasting the money to open up one retail dispensary. You know how much to establish an estate, you have to get a legal team, you have to buy real estate. I mean, it is a massive investment. When you can get a license in New York and get 8 locations, you know how many in Florida you can get with a medical dispensary license? 24 locations are allowed. New Jersey, I think it was either 6 or 8. New York was 4. Now they've increased it to 6. So, I mean, you're getting more bang for your buck in a much bigger market. If you're already bleeding money, you have very tight capitalization. You're going to focus the limited resources you have on where you're going to get the most return and most investment return. It's not Vermont. It's not even close. We're not even a secondary market. You know, it's like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Then they'll look at, you know, Massachusetts, Virginia. You know, we don't even rank. So, you know, and I could have told
another great point.
They told me I was crazy. They told me I was a corporate whore. I was called a corporate whore, a corporate shill. You know, and it's working with over 150 clients, all of which are small Vermont businesses, entrepreneurs. You know, it has been the most amazing thing for me.
Tim, can I tell you something? We got 5 minutes left here. Can we wrap this up and do another chunk?
Yeah, as much as you want, man.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna shut this off, and we're gonna come back, and we're gonna do another chunk. And we talk about banking and insurance.
Let's just keep going, brother.
Beautiful. All right, cool. I gotta.